So Miles Sanders, the new Carolina Panthers starting running back, he had this to say when talking about Bryce Young. He's cocky in a humble way, the humblest way. He knows who he is. I think we're in good hands. On the opposite side of things, so I saw C.J. Stroud recently talk about his Madden rating. A little upset about that. He's a little salty over it. Sitting in the 70s, but what are you going to do? Like, most rookies have horrible Madden ratings. It just kind of comes with the territory. You kind of have to prove it. Speaking of proving it, who's going to prove it in year one out of these two guys?
Oh, that's a good question, actually. Who's going to prove it between those two? I'm going to bet on Bryce Young. And the reason I'm going to bet on Bryce Young is regarded as the slightly better draft prospect and entering a better situation this year. The Houston Texans have had the worst record in the NFL over the last 3 seasons. If you add all the records up, I believe they're 11-33-1. It's something like that. Maybe 11-38-1 or something like that. But they have been the worst team in the NFL over the last 3 seasons. And despite the fact that they traded like all of their future draft capital to move up in the NFL draft this year and get 2 franchise-altering players, I don't think they're dramatically different on paper than they were to last year's team. I mean, yes, they have added Robert Woods, but they also subtract Brandon Cooks. They add Dalton Schultz in free agency, but they lose O.J. Howard, who was surprisingly a pretty good pickup for them off the waiver wire from Tampa Bay. So, I don't think they're dramatically different. You could argue maybe Will Anderson is going to be changing the entire construct of their defense by virtue of being there. And they gave up draft capital that suggests they believe him to be that type of prospect. Him and Derek Stingley are really the only 2 players that are really jump off the page on defense. I mean, they have a couple names on defense, but it's not really a defense that I think is going to be anywhere but in the bottom 10 in the league. Houston isn't really a very good team. And the best thing I can say about the Panthers is they will probably not finish last in their division this year because they are better than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Bryce Young has at least the foundation of competence built around him. I mean, that was a 7-win team last year. They traded Christian McCaffrey and somehow got better at the end of the season. They have 2 top-end offensive linemen. They have some names on defense, although I'd argue that 15 teams in the NFL have names on defense, and the Panthers defense is not remarkable, but at least it's not terrible. They have NFL quality players on defense, and so I think Bryce Young has a better chance of showing out to start his rookie campaign because he has a better foundation built around him.
Even though I like DeMeco, I love DeMeco. He was a great defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers for the last few years. We've seen this story time after time with a defensive-minded head coach bringing in like a younger quarterback like C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young in this case. When you look at Carolina, you look at what Bryce Young had. So Frank Reich kind of got dragged through the mud with how things went in Indianapolis, but he at least kind of knows what it's like to be an NFL quarterback, right? He can have that discussion with Bryce Young and kind of teach him the ropes. And, before everything happened in Indianapolis the way it did, Frank Reich obviously had the reputation of a guru. DeMeco did bring in Bobby Slowick, who's the best passing game coordinator for the 49ers, his OC. Now we've seen a lot of these like 49er guys, Rams guys, basically people coming out from like that West Coast coaching tree, set the world on fire, with bringing offense over to their respective teams. Go wrong too. We've also seen like what happened with the younger LaFleur in New York. Things really pan out there. It's entirely possible that doesn't necessarily translate. And even if it does, the Shanahan system has a reputation for taking multiple years to really stick in guys' minds. Matt Ryan even said he didn't really get it in year 1. There's a lot of verbiage, so that might take a little bit of time for C.J. Stroud to learn in his first in Houston. So as far as like who's going to show out in year 1, it might take C.J. Stroud a little bit longer just because of that, not necessarily just of the talent on the field versus Frank. Again, in Carolina, I think Frank Reich's going to try and make it as simple as he can for Bryce Young, and it only helps that he has some on his team like Adam Thielen, Sanders, guys who have been in the league to guide him in at least his rookie year and potentially into the next couple of years too, multi-year contracts for a couple of those dudes.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the Houston Texans are clearly a rebuilding project. I have joked for years now, they are in year 4 of a 5-year rebuild, and no NFL team has ever embarked on a 5-year rebuild because you're not supposed to be that bad. You're not supposed to give up all of your good players, all of your draft picks, and spend all of your money. It like the Houston Texans were run so poorly that it's taken them like 4 years to even have a chance of digging themselves out of the muck that Bill O'Brien and the youth pastor who ran the franchise for 3 years dug a hole for them into. So yeah, the Houston Texans are in year 4 of a 5-year rebuild. And at the very least now they have some talented players to show for it. Like I said, Derek Stingley and Will Anderson being the prizes at the end of it. I forgot Jimmy Ward plays for them now. That's actually a pretty good pickup following DeMeco over to Houston. So they have 3 good players on the defensive side of the ball. And like you said, it's going to be a bit of a building project. Obviously, DeMeco is going to bring that offense of the Mike Shanahan zone run scheme, all that stuff. They're going to try and bring that to Houston. They're going to try and run it with C.J. Stroud. It might end up helping Dameon Pierce for those of you who are fantasy football people, or maybe Devin Singletary. I know he's kind of the backup there, but I've seen enough of Devin Singletary to know what that is at this point in his career. So maybe that's going to help out the running game, and the running game will support Stroud a little bit, but I feel pretty confident saying the Houston Texans are going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL next season. They're going to lose a lot of games. And like you said, this season's going to be about development, where Carolina could come in and have immediate success. I'm not saying success in terms of like a deep playoff run, but they could be in the mix come week 17.
Well, too, let's add in their division, right? The NFC South relatively to the AFC South is wide open. The Texans have to build themselves up. The NFC South right now, I mean, probably the Saints might be the best team in that division. I'm seeing like Tampa trying to hype up everyone on Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask as their quarterback room. And the Falcons, I mean, okay, well, if you're buying hard on the Bijan Robinson stock, then sure, maybe Arthur Smith could will that team to more success in his 3rd year. But Carolina has a realistic shot just given how bad the division is around them.
And if that defense plays better than the average defense that they've been the last few years that everyone keeps trying to hype me up on and I just don't believe in, then perhaps Carolina finds a little bit of an identity. If you can be a top half team on offense and a top half team on defense, you're probably going to make the playoffs in the NFL. It doesn't guarantee you anything against, say, the Eagles or the 49ers or the Seattle Seahawks, but you know what? You can get pretty close to the playoffs if you just perform at average on both sides of the ball. And relatively speaking, Carolina has that skill set. And if Bryce Young is the quarterback that they traded 2 first-round picks and their franchise wide receiver to acquire, then they will have a measure of success potentially while Bryce Young is still on his rookie contract.
All right, guys. Well, let us know below in the comment section. Who are you buying stock in? Is it going to be Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud in year 1? Leave it in the comment section. Stay safe, happy, and healthy.